Dude, so I probably owe you an apology.
You owe me an apology? Why do you owe me an apology?
So, I was talking trash about your 49ers, right?
Oh, I know. It's all
Yep,
coming right back to me.
yep. I was talking trash. The Raiders are out. The 49ers are moving on. Part of me hoped that you didn't watch any of the games so you wouldn't remember, but I was like, no, I I have to bring it up and just at least acknowledge that your team moved on, even though I still think the Raiders are way better, and I can explain why. Probably take a whole podcast to do that. But congratulations, your team moved on, and mine did not. So, how are you feeling about that?
To be honest with you, I feel like I don't know if I'm alone or not. But as a Niners fan, the extremes are so extreme
Oh yeah,
that even when they're doing really, so I'm not to say that this is actually not a great example of that extremeness because they're doing well and they're chugging along. It's not like they're off the charts or anything
yeah.
right
They're
now.
more in the middle this year.
So
That's true.
exactly. So to be fair, they are more in the middle. But as a Niners fan, I'm like, I don't know. Part of me just doesn't want to get too excited.
Yeah,
I have to say, partly too, as a like born and raised fan, I every time the Niners start doing well, everybody and their mom starts where it becomes a Niners fan.
dude,
You know what I mean?
such fair weather fans. It's
It's
so
such
bad.
it's so bad. When it's so bad that as somebody who's not a fair weather fan, you almost want to do the opposite of what all the fair weather fans are doing, right? So it makes it for a real bittersweet success, getting into the playoffs. That said, I do have to say, so I didn't catch the best part of the game, unfortunately. And my goal was to get on and watch the end of the game that I missed
Yeah.
before we got on here. But I didn't get to do that. But so I want to hear a little bit of how you experienced the end of that game. But I do have to say, now I'm even more excited based on your
Yeah.
laugh. Um, I do have to say I caught the beginning of it and dude, immediately like seeing them line up in those old jerseys and the Dallas jerseys aren't quite the same in terms of the nostalgia, but very similar. Both of the teams were wearing almost the same jersey as
Yeah.
they were when we were kids. And like I had this moment of just like I don't know, it was like seeing an adult version of the Power Rangers manifest. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what was even better than the game is something I'm currently obsessed with, and that is the memes that come out after the game. So there's this page. Make sure you check this out. I can't believe I didn't tell you this already. So it's called, I think, NFL memes underscore IG or something like that. They have like 1 to 2 million followers. It's a huge page, and literally their mission is it says to make fun of your football team. So I could seriously sit there for hours and just laugh at the memes just making fun of teams. And the Cowboys, they got made fun of more than any other team because the Cowboys did a lot of trash talking, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, during the year about how they're going to go far and how they're better than everyone and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they got hammered. They got hammered on the memes page. Oh my gosh, dude! Like, it was really bad. You have to check it out though.
I'm excited to. I do have to say the little bit that I have been kind of keeping up with the fallout of the game. It's been really interesting to see the whole Dak Prescott and like have you saw that the NBA Ref Association put out a public statement condemning what Prescott said about. So for a little context, after the game, um, one of the reporters was basically asking him, "Hey, how about those fans throwing trash at you
Oh,
guys
yep,
as you
yep.
walked on?"
Okay, I know
And
what
he
you're
was
talking
like,
about.
"Oh
Yep.
no!" But then somebody was like, "Well, they're actually throwing at the officials." And Dak Prescott's, "Well, I get it," you know what I mean? Which, you know, I understand 100% why all these NBA officials came out and were like, "Look, you can't even seemingly condone violence towards the officials. It's dangerous. It's a very slippery slope, right?" That said, like I
It's like,
I
come
feel like
on.
yeah, and I feel like it's also you're talking about the guy who just led his team in a full on assault, and you know, regardless of how you feel the game was called,
Yeah.
officials are people and they make mistakes, and that happens. So
Dude.
it's like You know what I mean? Like it's hard to say, hey, don't talk about the mistakes that human made. You know what I mean? Like, let's just all pretend like the official was called a perfect game. And again, I'm not making a statement one way or the other. It's just interesting.
I think a few things. So, I mean, this is a highly competitive NFL quarterback who just lost, and people are getting on him for something he said. It's like, guys, come on, like, relax. He's not condoning violence. People are just taking it too far. He wasn't saying, yes, let's go hurt people. I think people just get excited and then want to create clickbait online. Yeah, even though I agree with you, of course, don't do anything that actually is condoning violence. But he literally just watched the game or lost the game. And let's be real, that is a terrible way to end the season. You know, like you could blame it on the ref, you can blame it on Dak for the situation, but to lose literally because, you know, the ball wasn't placed in time. And, you know, like I said, you could blame the ref for that because they weren't over there yet. You could blame Dak for not giving him the football or whoever had the ball last. But that's a terrible way to lose a season. Can you imagine? They could have gotten another shot. So, you know, we will never know what would have happened, obviously, but that's crummy.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you layer in all the other stuff like the, you know, decades-long rivalry, the fact that in a lot of ways the Niners and the Cowboys are kind of parallel in the fact that they both have these, over this last 5, 6, 7 years, have had these teams with a lot of talent on them, but they aren't necessarily coalescing for one reason or another. So you have these two really talented teams that have kind of pulled themselves up by their bootstraps to get where they're at.
Yeah.
There's so much emotion about that. And to be fair, you know, since we're touching on this, we might as well touch on the fact, too, that he did release an official apology, just being like, look, I wasn't, you know, basically it's kind of what we're saying. He was like, I wasn't trying to be like, you know, clearly I don't want any violence towards any refs. And I'm not going to try to quote, but unlike a lot of folks who get in trouble in our, I don't want to get into cancel culture, but, you know, who get in trouble in our cancel culture, really, he really did just was kind of like, hey, look, let's not mince words. I said something I shouldn't have said, but like, let's move on. He didn't say let's move on, but the way he apologized, took ownership, and that's how we move on, and that's what people are kind of like missing with all that, you know.
There you go. And now I'm sure the audience is happy because now they will not hear me talk about the Raiders most likely for at least a couple months. Sorry, or you're welcome, audience. You're not going to hear me for a couple months, but when the draft happens, then I'll probably start to bring it up a little bit again and probably start to trash talk Clayton a little bit again. So you guys are welcome for the next couple months from here on out. There's going to be very little Raider talk. I'm going to do my best to control myself at least.
Well, I'm excited, excuse me, about Andrew coming on board in whatever capacity he joins us, because then it's going to be two diehard Raiders fans against one. I'm a true Niners fan, but I'm not a fanatic in general. Like, I tend to consider myself very kind of centered with like being a fan. And to that point, actually, that'll be fun because really I love the Raiders too. I grew up as a Raider hater, to be honest with you. You know, it was the Bay rivalry action, but I can't deny a team that's so tenacious. There is no team in the NFL more maybe like the Jags, but you know, there's not many teams in the NFL that are as tenacious as the Raiders, because there's a lot of teams that stick with it, but there aren't that many teams that, despite so many losses over such an extended period of time, just keep coming.
What you're saying.
You know what I mean? Like, and they keep coming. It's like every season is a new season. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, dude, the Raiders do have, I think, one of the strongest brands out of any team. Just that Al Davis mentality, just known for being so hardcore and everything. So that's why it's really cool to be a Raider fan, because they're, you know, kind of all in type of like, you know, hardcore and just love their team. So I would love to say I'm a chill fan. I was for a while, and then the last 2 years something happened, and now I'm the type of fan where, like, I'm not even kidding, dude. Like, the night before, I'll, like, get nervous and it's hard to sleep before games. Like, it's getting a little out of hand. Like, that's a little bit out of hand, I'll admit. But I mean, and my wife makes fun of me too. Like I'll call my brother-in-law because he's the most diehard fan I've ever met, and we'll discuss the game coming up like we're coaches or something, like strategy or something like that. So I get made fun of for that, but you know what? It's fun. It's fun being a Raider fan. So, dude, I can't remember. Did I bring up farting in a jar with you already?
I think we did talk
We
about
did.
it briefly.
Oh, we
Mhm.
did.
I think we
Okay.
did talk. I don't remember if it was we included in the podcast. It might have been like a pre-pod. So I guess, folks, if you've heard us talk about this, kind of apologies, but kind of not, because it's fart in a jar. So
Dude.
we can bring this up every week.
And so I'm bringing it up because I've seen this person, I don't know her name, again, like articles pop up about this person that is making $50,000 a week by farting in a jar and selling it. So
Yeah.
this,
It's like 90
knowing
Day
this,
Fiance, I think, right?
oh, okay, I think you're right. I couldn't remember, but that sounds right. But dude, I don't know if this makes me really happy knowing the potential to make that type of money is there, especially in the US, or if this makes me upset, like, put in all the work that, a lot of people do to do well financially, and then someone can just fart in a jar and then make 50K in a week. I don't know if that makes me upset or happy. I'm not sure.
It's such a weird mixed bag. There's a guy who was on Tosh.0. He was, they have. You ever watch Tosh.0?
Tosh.0.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So they do the redemptions, I think, web redemptions, where whoever got famous for a stupid video, they can go on to Tosh.0 and kind of. I mean, they're
Oh,
mostly
that's
making fun
right.
of themselves, but it gives them the opportunity to
Yeah.
kind of switch the script,
I forgot about that. That's right.
Um, um, and I lost the train of thought, but yeah, I don't
We were
know.
talking about fart in a jar,
Oh, thank you.
and then yeah.
So a person came on to Tosh.0 who he makes his money by sneezing online.
Stop.
I
Stop
swear
it.
to God,
Stop
you can't
messing
even
with
make
me
this up.
right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like literally he's like he must. I think it's like he goes on to like voyeur like fetish sites, but he's not doing anything sexual. He's like me, and this is where it comes into play for me. So like me, he goes
With
on
your crazy
naturally.
sneezes?
Yeah, exactly. You remember like I go
Oh
on my
yeah, of
sneeze
course I
rolls.
do.
This guy, he does on Tosh.0. He has got like some powder that he orders online, and he like bumps it like it's freaking drugs.
Some powder.
Yeah, he's some powder, but it's like some spice or something, and what it does is it coats his sinuses, and he goes on to these long sneezes, and apparently he makes good money doing it. I'm sure like he's had to make peace with the fact that people are doing all kinds of things on the other end of the screen, but for me, as somebody who sneezes a lot, like, what am I doing working?
Why
Like,
don't
what I
you just
mean?
go and sneeze all the time? Dude,
Dude,
your sneezes are impressive. See, like for mine, I force them to make them louder on purpose. I guess I still do that. Fully grown man, yeah, I know. But yours are like actually loud, and they're. I remember you would sneeze like 6 or 8 or 10 times in a row, which I sneeze a lot in a row too. I do the same thing, but I force it to make it loud.
It's depending on who you talk to. It's insisted. My partner would insist that I do that as well. I disagree. I just let it flow, baby.
Just let it flow.
Just let it flow. Yeah, it does get weird though on my end because each one feels good. You know that feeling
Oh, yeah.
of catharsis when you sneeze. Well, when you
Yeah.
group a bunch of them together, they build, they stack.
Oh, yeah.
So it's funny because like after like 8 or 10 sneezes, you're like, Woo! It's like
Oh yeah.
The Harry Met Sally scene where she's faking an orgasm. Like I feel like that every time I do it. I mean, but I'm not faking it. So I get a bunch of little really good feelings.
Well, speaking of movies, have we talked about the Theranos movie that's coming out? Or do you know what Theranos is? I don't remember if we talked about this already.
We haven't talked about it. I know a little bit about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay. All right. So just a recap for you, just in case, and then if the audience hasn't looked into this, Theranos was a company that got shut down believe it was 2018. So this 19-year-old girl named Elizabeth Holmes founded this company, which for one, that is insane being only 19. And the company, so what it said it was going to do was with a drop of blood, so like with a little finger prick, they could do blood labs and test for, I believe it's hundreds of diseases with just a drop of blood versus, having to actually get blood draws and get an IV and everything. So this was going to be some breakthrough technology. And this 19-year-old raised $700 million from investors. And that part alone is crazy to me, that she got that many people to believe in her. It's hard enough to get investors to be on board with what you're doing. And she was only 19 years old. So $700 million. And outwardly, it looked like she was some superhero. A ton of people, especially young women, really looked up to her. And she even had, at the time Joe Biden was vice president, she apparently invited him to their headquarters where their lab was supposed to be, but there wasn't a real lab. And apparently they just had to make a fake lab when Joe Biden and whoever else was there got there. So it wasn't a real lab. And so long story short, yeah, dude, it was insane. There's a documentary, forgot the name, but it's amazing. So you should watch that too. Anyways though, so eventually, I don't know who was the one that blew the whistle, but obviously you can't continue that forever. She wasn't doing all these things that she was saying she was doing, and she just got convicted of her crimes. Must have been a month ago or something, and she's going to be going to prison for a very long time. But there's going to be a movie coming out called Bad Blood, and Apple is going to be making the movie. So I'm really excited to see it because the documentary was really cool. So
when we get off later, would you send that to me? And we should actually, if we think about it, we should post that, a link to that in the Discord or something, because that's a really cool thing to be able to share with people. It's also again, Jake pretty much just gave you the rundown, but it's made by Adam McKay, who made Step Brothers, and he made the Dick Cheney movie. So, like, highly regarded filmmaker too, who's doing that. So it should be pretty interesting and be entertaining, because that's one of the things that Adam McKay is really good at. Is he has sometimes really serious topics, but he makes them enjoyable with just a touch of silliness. So I'm looking forward to that. Although this sounds like whatever humor is going to be in it will probably be pretty dark considering the subject matter.
Yeah.
So.
And it's something really weird too about Elizabeth Holmes. So to sound more respected or something, so they claimed, she would talk with a really deep voice intentionally.
Oh, really?
So she would make herself sound like a man and project her voice, and she would talk like that all the time. Just to sound like that. But I guess they caught her a few times on tape speaking normally, and her voice was significantly different. So she was a complete fraud. Like, even how she spoke.
She's a confidence person, really, when it gets down to it. She's a con man. She's and I'm not even saying that judgmentally, because everyone's got a job. I'm not speaking to whether obviously that's got some really wide-reaching, potentially harmful effects, though, right? It's one of the things I was watching really about it, listening to about it, was that she was really influenced by like Steve Jobs and these tech moguls, and I think Richard Murdoch even donated like 150 million of that. I think you said 800 million or whatever it was.
I think it was 700 million or so.
700 million, yeah. So she was getting fundraised by like the titans of industry and stuff. So she was, talk about whether she was well-meaning at the beginning or not. She was able to convince a bunch of people who are not easily convinced to like just throw money around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those guys didn't get rich by throwing money around. Well, that's a whole other nuanced conversation, but context-wise, right?
That's actually a good question too. I didn't think about that. If she knew in the beginning what she was doing and frauding people, or if she set out to do something good. If I were to guess, and I think she went to Stanford, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know, somewhere over there. But I feel as though she was trying to do good,
Yeah.
and very early on saw that it wasn't working, and then slowly started just doing things that were, without integrity, and just a
Yep.
few little things. And then it just started snowballing where, okay, well, this was okay. Well, this will be okay too. And then this will be okay. And then the pattern just continued until it was full on fraudulence and going to prison and everything. So,
Well, we hope that all the people that are out there who are potentially affected by that are, reaching out to resources that will help them rectify whatever situation they may have found themselves. Because it's interesting as we're talking about it, it's really easy to kind of think about this as something that's happening in the world, but this is a podcast that's happening on the world, so it's reasonable to think that somebody might be listening to this one day who was directly affected by that. So,
yep.
Whether it's you or somebody else or just out in the world, we hope that things are working out. A lot of what drives us here at Mission Driven Made is kind of presenting the opposite of that fake confidence, right? Instead of bringing you guys a bunch of material where we're like, hey, this is great and this is great, we're sitting and talking about it and discussing, the nuance and intricacies of it,
Yep.
so that we can, as a society and as individuals, avoid situations like this where we're getting involved with people who may seem like they have our best interests in mind, but in fact, almost never do people really have your interests in mind unless it lines up with their interests. Perfect
That's
example.
so true.
Right? Well, and a perfect example is even this podcast, right? We are doing this genuinely to bring you guys this information, but it aligns with our bottom line. It aligns with mine and Jake's desire to create lucrative viable careers talking about this stuff. So we have self-interest, but our self-interest is in line with giving you guys the best information you can have. The problem is when those two things diverge, we start talking about stuff like I keep wanting to say theremin. Theremin is the instrument where it's like the
Theranos.
Star Trek. Theranos. Theremin. I'm just gonna keep calling him theremin.
It's funny you're talking about the point that you're just making. I just this morning posted about this on Instagram about all these scams that are happening on Instagram. And I just read about multiple ones recently. Fitness IG influencers with humongous followings, offering some service and it being a complete fraud. And I was literally reading this person this morning. I don't even remember her name. But, there's going to be a bunch of legal action getting taken against her by her followers because of these scammy things. So I posted about that and about just some red flags to look out for when people are being scammy like that or being charlatans. Because, sometimes it is hard to tell. But basically what I covered was there's always a lot of buzzwords, like too many buzzwords, like torching fat, or they say they have the secret. That's a common one too. A lot of people just say that just to get attention. But so they say that. Then they make claims that seem way too good to be true. Just recently, I don't know why I was on Thumbtack. For some reason, I was on Thumbtack looking at something. And this personal trainer who it said he'd been in the industry for 20 years or something and had a bunch of good reviews. He was claiming to people that he could help them gain 15 to 30 pounds of muscle in 30 days. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that is such a lie. It's not even funny. So I don't know how this guy had good reviews, but there's that. And then on top of that, there was one more point that I made, and I'm blanking on right now, but those are the two main points that I was talking about this morning. It's so disheartening to see these people and what they are doing to, a lot of people that may be down on themselves or they're feeling emotional about something going on in their life. There's some pain point that these scammers are taking advantage
Yep.
of. You know, like what one person I even read that I can't remember if they're going to take legal action or not, but saying, you know, she couldn't stop binge eating and she was feeling suicidal and all this stuff, right? And then here comes, you know, this fitness IG influencer saying that she can cure all her problems and all that, but then obviously didn't follow through with what she promised. So that is a big reason why we're doing this, to combat that. I know it's never going to go away. There's always going to be the charlatans out there, but it's pretty disheartening to see that just over and over, you know?
Yeah, I feel like for me, I really have to kind of take a step back and ask myself, what are these people doing it for? Because, and again, I'm only speaking for myself, but it's easy as somebody who is invested in the emotional and moral strength and fortitude that it affords you, all this kind of work. It's too easily presented as a fake carrot, you know.
The fake carrot, that's good.
Because it's this, and kind of whatever the specific thing looks like, all these versions have a similar equation, which is you plus this equals, you know, health, or you know, you plus system X equals,
Yep.
you know, being lean and buff. And no matter how you cut it, and anybody worth their salt in this business will agree with at least the sentiment of what I'm saying, there is that it doesn't exist, like the equation, it doesn't exist that simply. You're trying to do addition on calculus. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
like we're the way that calorie surplus, calorie deficit, metabolism, sleep, the way that all these things interact, and that's not even really talking about like really getting into the specific nutrition. All these things are incredibly complex, nuanced variables that create different circumstances. So anytime that you're talking about, anytime you see somebody present a solution as a one size fits all, either one, that one size fits all is actually a bunch of different sizes within that program, and that's a successful program, or more likely it's just a baloney program that, you know, might be in its core principles in line, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you what you need to be successful.
And that really reminds me, with you just saying that, it reminds me of transformation photos. Now, I can't, I'm not going to sit here, I can't go to the point of saying they're wrong or you're a charlatan or it's false. I won't go that far. So this is completely just my personal opinion. There is something I really don't like about transformation photos.
Misleading.
Yeah, misleading. There you go. There's something else I can't pinpoint. It just, there's something, I don't want to say sleazy either, because that's not completely fair, but showing a person, you know, with their shirt off here and then here, and then it's kind of saying, okay, if you do my program, this will exactly happen for you too, when that's not necessarily the case. So I don't know what it is. I do know that companies do that because the additional amount of revenue that will turn out by doing that is huge. That gets, I don't remember the percentage, but the amount of eyeballs on that service or product, it's like 10 times more or something like that if you're showing transformation photos. And something that I did hear recently too, which completely makes sense, is apparently a lot of times those photos are complete lies. Like, so what they'll do, I didn't know about this until recently. So they'll go, some of these people from companies will go to like a bodybuilding show. When there's some bodybuilder there that's at, you know, 5 or 6% body fat, completely ripped, and then ask them to be part of a transformation photo. But what they'll do, they'll take a picture when they're already ripped, okay?
Right.
And then they'll, you know, allow the bodybuilder to gain, you know, a bunch of weight, a bunch of fat, obviously, over the next 4 or 5 months, whatever it is. And then they'll swap the photos.
Oh,
So
I never even heard or thought of that.
Yep. So
Crazy.
that photo isn't actually an after. It's actually the before, but they just swap it because it's easier to do that way. So that completely is wrong. in every way, shape, and form. But still, just regular transformation photos, there's something that I don't like about it. And the misleading part, that's probably what you said, but there's something else. Like I feel there's a better way to go about, promoting your service or product. I don't know exactly what it is, so maybe I shouldn't complain about it until I have a solution for it. But I don't know, just something weird about them.
I mean, honestly, I really feel like this is kind of the nitty gritty of why we're even here, because this is a really tough topic, because in some ways it's inextricable from our business. You know what I mean? There will, like charlatans, there will always be an existence of that before and after. And my guess is that there will always be a range of legitimacy behind them, right? Because, there are some,
Yeah, of
there
course.
are really useful before and after pictures out there. But generally speaking, in practice, what you're going to see is it doesn't look as good from like a customer standpoint. Like, you get the what you're talking about is like the really crisp, professional looking pictures, and like it's amazing, it's bombastic. The ones that are more realistic are going to be like the cell phone picture before and after of the person in the gym, where the difference is not they don't look like two completely different people.
Yeah.
One of them is they were heavier, and the next one they're leaner and clearly stronger. Those, but it's not as sexy. It's not as sexy as seeing some dude with his shirt off with pointy nipples and his, the water's cascading down his abs, right? That's not what we want to be sold as people. So the question is, as a consumer, do you want to be sold, or do you want to go and find out what's going to work for you? Because if you want to go be sold, rock the IG route. If you want to be sold and you want to find an easy way, knowing that there is no easy way, go run that route. You're not getting judgment from us. But if you're somebody who would rather learn as much as they can and learn how to apply that in a habitual, progressive manner, then you're ready to start looking into some real quality personal training, or, getting in touch with somebody like Jake or myself who can offer those kind of services online. I will mention, for me, I'm never as effective online with somebody as I am in person. And I feel I shouldn't say that.
It's a separate journey, though. It's separate.
Exactly. So let me take a step back. I, as a trainer, always feel like I can't give somebody as good of an experience online as I am when I'm working with them. But that doesn't mean that you as a consumer should value that any less, because what we're talking about now is the difference between you potentially doing stuff and you potentially not doing stuff. So is working out with a trainer in person probably going to be more efficient and effective in some ways than working out online? Yeah. But, in some ways doing it online is going to be more efficient and effective, because you don't have to get to a gym. You can do it from your, phone. You can do it in your living room. And that's not even to mention COVID. I mean, COVID is just is forcing us to do all this online. So hear me when I say I train people online, and I absolutely encourage people to utilize that. But it's a different thing. Like you said, it's a completely different journey.
Yeah. And something else too that I'm not a fan of at all, and maybe this is controversial to say, but I think it's pretty lame when people have to rely on pictures of themselves with their shirt off to blow up their IG account or to blow up their service or product. And here's the thing that's even kind of hard to say, because there are some people that I actually very much so look up to and actually learn a lot from. There's a few of them out there that do that, and I'm just going to be honest, I despise that. Like when people, they have to, I would say 99% of their pictures or videos, they're working out with their shirt off. Yeah. And there's something so sleazy about that when these guys are doing that. It's like they're selling their abs versus actual value that they're bringing. And it just creates this like emotional response for people. Like, oh, he has abs, so I have to go to him. The funny thing is, you can have no idea how to train someone or to give actual advice and have a six pack. That's a very real thing. I remember in high school, I had a couple friends. You know, I was in the gym working hard, and the stuff I would see them do or not do, and you know, they would still naturally have abs and stuff.
Yeah, right.
No, it was just funny, like something that I had to work for, you know, really hard over years with, you know, fitness and also obviously the nutrition side to have abs. But I would see someone, you know, eating whatever they want, the way they would work out or be inconsistent wouldn't match with that six pack you would see. So anyways, though, I just don't like it's to the point where that's commonplace online. And, you know, I think there's a better way to do it, but everyone knows it's doing that. It's going to get more clicks. It's going to get, you know, more views, and then essentially it's going to sell more. Yeah. And I just don't think that's the best way to go about it personally.
Despite the more obvious moral implications of being semi-naked on camera to sell yourself, there's also a disconnect in authenticity when you do that. And the problem is, whether intentionally or not, what ends up happening is, as providers, we end up putting the images and the videos of ourselves that show us at our best. And because we're human beings, we don't put pictures of us up at our worst. So what it creates is like the social media effect of like, oh, all this is great and all this guy is ripped and he gets up every morning and he gets at it. But what you don't see is that after he gets done with his workout, he might feel a little depressed about it doesn't matter what it is, right? The point is we get this rose shaded image from the way that we think it's the right appropriate to sell ourselves, and what ends up happening is the audience doesn't get the full picture. The audience doesn't get to see you when you're flabby with your love handles poking out farther than your shoulders, because I'm not going to be like, hey, look at me, guys, come train with me with my, with my whatever, this is how I feel as you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to show off the parts of me that aren't sexy or going to motivate you to come and work out with me, because it doesn't serve my purpose. But in the process, we lose something that's really valuable, which is realism, the human condition, and I mean, I said realism, but just authenticity, right? I mean, it's not, when you see Chris Hemsworth in a Marvel movie strip his shirt off, he's been training for 9 months for that moment. And he's been training hard and eating very super zoned in for that moment. And that is a product of all that work. But when we see it in the movie, we're like, oh, that's how Chris Hemsworth looks. I mean, granted, he's an example of somebody who stays fit, so it's, he's not necessarily the best example to underline this, but the point being is that what we receive as consumers is very rarely the full picture. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is show that full picture. So get prepared for Jake and Clayton Love Handle Edition.
There you go. We're going to gain tons of weight and take pictures of ourselves with our shirt off with love handles and and promote
I've got them. I'm in good shape right now. I'll tell you, for me that's the last thing I lose. So I can be like really lean and really strong, and then I'll take my shirt off and I still got those love handles.
Dude, we should
that's my body.
A before and after picture, but the second picture significantly more body fat, and then promote and see what it does.
Just like hella honest, like KFC and like Big Gulp is in the picture. Gosh. Not that there's anything wrong with KFC or Big Gulp, but if you want to be lean, those are not the best strategies.
Well, you ready to talk a little bit of fitness?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do it then. Let's start with, this is a common question that I see a lot, I've talked about a lot, and that is, should you train for strength and endurance at the same time? So, as always, this answer is going to start with it depends. And that's
Yeah,
not a cop out answer,
absolutely.
but it's the truth. So I will say, and I heard this saying for the first time a couple months ago, and I love it. I think I've used it on the show, is if you try to catch two rabbits at the same time, you'll probably
Yep.
catch none.
Yeah,
So
I
with
love that.
that being said,
Did you make that up? No, you
oh
heard that
heck no, I
somewhere.
didn't make that
Okay.
up. I stole that from it came from someone who stole it from someone, and then it was probably from some philosopher or something. I'm not exactly sure, but
I love it.
I did not make that up. I just really liked it though. And here's the thing. So our bodies are great. We've talked about this before in the show at adapting to the demands that you place on it. So, for example, if a brand new person that has never exercised try to train for both of these, strength and endurance, they're actually going to see assuming they're consistent, they're probably going to see a lot of success with
Mhm.
that for the first year, maybe 2 years, depending on the person. And you could say, wait, so shouldn't everyone train this way? Now, here, this is where you start running into the issue a little bit more. Once you are no longer a beginner and you've been training for, I would say, maybe at least a couple years, there comes a point where it's going to be very difficult to chase two opposing different stimuluses and actually improving upon both of those. One day, both of those different training modalities or the, the adaptations from those training modalities, they're going to start to slow down and you're not going to see as many results. And I've also mentioned this before. My personal experience with this when I used to do CrossFit, which I don't do anymore, I, got in a great shape for the first couple years. Everything was improving. My strength, my endurance, every energy system was all of that was improving. And then surely enough, at about the 2 year mark, not only did I plateau, it went the opposite way. My squat went down, my squat and deadlift went down 60 or 70 pounds, something like that. I can't remember exactly. My endurance wasn't improving. Nothing was improving. I was just stuck. Uh, the thing though, some people, advanced people, do train this way and they still make improvements. So here's why. It's a multitude of factors. One, genetics does play a big role into this. You can't
Definitely.
escape that. That's the truth. But if you look deeper into these people, into their training program, they're still probably favoring one of the two training modalities. So, for example, someone that has strength training and endurance training, and they have, say, a marathon or a Spartan race or something like the endurance-based event coming up, they're still going to favor the endurance training. They're going to do that a little bit more. The weight training is going to be second to that. So they're probably going to weight train maybe a couple days a week with the goal of maintaining their muscle and strength and not losing anything, but still favoring their endurance. So I think it's best if you've been lifting for a little bit and you have specific goals, I would focus more on one versus the other. That's not to say you can't do both. That's not true at all. If you're someone that wants to lift weights for strength and you also really like aerobic work, you can absolutely do that. And even some amount of aerobic work could help you with your strength training. If you have a robust aerobic system, it can help you recover faster in between your sets when you're lifting weights. The problem is when we start dosing the aerobic work too high. When, like I said, you start chasing both those rabbits. So you start doing hours of cardio,
Hmm.
hours and hours of cardio every week, hours and hours and hours of strength training every week. That's when you're going to start running into problems and getting what's known as that interference effect. I'm not saying this, the context of all this, I'm not trying to scare anyone out of doing, say, cardio work if you're doing strength training, because I think cardio is amazing and that everyone should do it. I'm not saying that at all. Just realize it will come to a certain point after a couple years, somewhere around there, where you're going to struggle to make improvements in both.
I can't agree with everything that you said more. I'm gonna pretty much kind of say my version of that because like I said, I mean, really, guys, Jake just said it. But my little 2 cents here is, and you guys are not going to be surprised about this, but how is it practical? How is it functional? Right? What's our goal? What's the purpose of what we're doing it for? And if does the way that we approach it cause either of those to suffer, right? So when we're talking about, you mentioned that somebody early on can train strength and endurance at the same time. In fact, if you're just getting started, you absolutely should be training strength and endurance at the same time, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase your body's ability to deal with stressors. So from an endurance and strength standpoint, it makes sense to do that up front. As Jake's saying, as we go along, we get used, our bodies and our brains get used to what we're doing. So one of the other advantages of this question and how we address it is that it gives us an answer to another problem when we're talking about fitness. And this is something that people get caught in every day, especially folks like you and I who've been doing it for a long time, and that's habitual repetition and our brain and our body's ability to get used to routine. So knowing that whether you're starting training earlier or you're an advanced weightlifter, knowing that your best move is to create breadth and depth in your routine, all of a sudden the question is, why would I want to train strength and endurance at the same time? Because now I've got this opportunity to train strength one day and train endurance another day, and that gives me the ability to vary my workouts and my routines in a way that is ultimately more advantageous and helps us continue to move towards our goals, whether that's to be leaner, stronger, more flexible, whatever it is. The answer is progression, right? So it's like a lot of things we talk about. For me, less a question of whether we should or we shouldn't, and more a question of how can we utilize all of those skills in different forms and in different places, whether that's in a different time place, whether it's on Monday or Friday, or whether that's in different, mixture of modalities in a single workout. The answer is you want kind of all of that. So this helps you to get there when you start asking that question: do I want to train for strength today, or do I want to train for endurance today? So.
And Clayton brought up a really good point there that I didn't even think about, was the question of why, about why you want to do both. I didn't even think about that. That's fantastic. Another consideration too, if you're someone that's going to train for strength and endurance, or even if you're someone that just really enjoys doing lots of cardio, is if you can, if it's possible and it fits with your lifestyle, try to do your aerobic work on days you aren't strength training, if that's possible. If not, that's completely fine. From there, we would go, if you can separate the strength and endurance work like 8 hours or so during the day, so splitting up your sessions, that would be ideal. If you can't do that, but you do want to do both, I would normally, for most people, recommend doing your strength training first, and then from there doing your endurance training directly after. That's going to be less impacted doing strength training first, then endurance, versus if you did a whole bunch of endurance training, that would significantly impact your strength training if you did it right after. So let's.
I want to pause real quick, because what you just said is really important, but it also creates potential confusion, because we want to say, when we're talking about endurance, cardio, and strength, endurance can be training. We can be training resistance or cardio when we're talking about training endurance. So I just, for our listeners, want to make sure that we're clear about that. Endurance training does not equal cardio. We can do endurance training with cardio, and we can do endurance training with lifting as well. the way we approach it is differently. So just a little touch on that. I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Yep. Good point. Good point. And moving on here, we're going to go over some of our favorite exercises to improve your grip strength. And the cool thing about this, so for me, I had to work on just about every single thing when I started, working with barbells. Like my lower body was weak, my upper body wasn't that strong. I was terrible at producing power, but the one thing that I was okay at from the get-go was grip strength. But still, so let's go over a few of our different favorite movements for this. And I'm going to start with...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to get better at not cutting you off as you're flowing.
Oh, no, go ahead.
But would you say, before we get into it, would you say that your grip strength was better off when you got into the CrossFit and Olympic style weightlifting because of the fire training you did?
That's a great question, because in the fire department, you are carrying a lot of odd objects and heavy objects by your side. So even though I wasn't thinking about it at this moment, looking back, that definitely could have played a part in helping me in that way. Because I did start to get more into CrossFit after I was in the fire department. I did it a little bit before, but where I started training that way, 6 days a week, was after I was in the fire department. So that definitely could have been, one of the factors for grip strength. Nice. And I'm going to go with, for number one, this is probably my favorite for grip strength, and that is going to be a farmer's walk. Now, here's what I love about farmer's walks. It's very functional. That term gets tossed around a lot, so I'll be a little bit more specific. Most human beings, this exercise can directly correlate to helping them in everyday life. Something like carrying groceries or anything by your side. Most of us do that at some point. And the other thing, Clayton, that I love about farmer's walks is, for the most part, it is a pretty low skill movement, or at least one that's easy to do, especially if you're not doing super heavy weight yet. It's a pretty easy movement to do. You're going to pick up most likely dumbbells, put them at your side, and you're going to walk. Of course, you want to have a nice braced and tight core. You want to have good posture, all those things. But for the most part, there's not tons of skill in the movement if we're comparing it to, say, an Olympic lift. And the reason I know these are so beneficial for our grip, when something gives out first, it's going to be our grip here, versus other movements that we're going to cover in a second. Other things can give out first, so it might not be your grip, but these directly work your grip. And I love doing these whether you're doing a little bit lighter of a weight and working on muscular endurance, and say you walk a quarter mile with weights by your side doing the farmer's walk, or going a lot heavier and doing, say 30, 40, 50 yards with them and setting them down. I think it's a great movement.
Love it. I'm a big fan of the farmer's walk too. Well, I'll get more into that in a minute, but while in the context of this conversation, absolutely, I'm a big fan of farmer's walk. I'll explain in a minute why my favorites are actually kind of a little bit of the opposite of the farmer's walk, but I would like to hear about your other ones before I launch off and kind of go off on my tangent.
Cool. Yeah, I'll go through a couple more and then add in whatever you want as far as your favorites.
Which, by the way, guys, everyone listening, if when you heard that weird, Jake didn't hear it, but there was a weird fitness dudes. We were pulling up, Jake, while you were talking about farmer's walk. I pulled up on the live stream a YouTube video of somebody doing the farmer's walk while we're doing it. Sound came on. It was like fitness dudes.
Nice.
So if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you're like, "What the hell was that?"
It was fitness dudes.
Fitness dudes. Yeah. Anyway, so okay. So Jake's all about the farmer's walk. I do want to, like I said, I will touch on that in a minute, but I'd like to hear about your other stuff.
So I'm going to move on to heavy deadlifts, and the reason. Well, actually, let me backtrack here a little bit. I do like heavy deadlifts for this, but the only issue with this, it's very person dependent, because some people, when they're doing a deadlift, their grip is going to be the first thing that gives out versus anything else. For some, Like myself, my grip doesn't give out first. That my hamstrings, my glutes, and my fatigue from there, that
Wow.
gives out first. So it just depends on the person. But challenging your grip with deadlifts is a great way to increase your strength. And there's also a lot of cool ways to do this with your deadlift. If you really want to test your grip, you could do what's called the double pronated grip. That's just a standard way that most people hold onto a barbell. That's actually going to be the most challenging. If any of you have seen someone do what's called a mixed grip, that's where one hand is going to be facing up or supinated, the other one's going to be pronated. So that's also called a mixed grip. When you're doing this, the bar doesn't have, there's no weak points in there with the opposing grips, so it's easier to hold on to more weight. If you were just holding on with your front hand, I know this might be kind of hard to see if you're not watching us here on YouTube, but with your front hand in that pronated grip, the bar wants to roll backwards, if that makes sense. Now with your underhand or supinated grip, the bar wants to roll forwards out of your hand. So having this mixed grip, there's nowhere for it to quote unquote roll. So that's why you're going to be able to do the most weight. If you stick with that standard grip that I went over a second ago, where both hands are pronated, so you can see your knuckles when looking down or see the back of your hand, that's going to work on your grip the most and help improve your grip strength. Next, after heavy deadlifts, I'm going to go with plate pinches. Now, I didn't think of doing these on my own. This was actually introduced to me by the owner of the CrossFit gym that I used to work at. And man, these were something else. So you take, let's say, a 25-pound Olympic weightlifting plate. It doesn't have to be 25 pounds. That was just the first one that came to my mind. And you're going to pinch just the top of the plate. And your forearms are going to blow up in about 10 or 15 seconds there. So all you're going to do, you're going to hold there as long as you can and do a couple sets of that. That's going to significantly help you improve your grip. It's also going to work a different part of your forearm muscle. And then the last one that I have here is a bar hang. Again, a very low skill movement. All you have to do is jump up to the pull-up bar and hold on. That's all you have to do. This one I would recommend doing toward the end of a workout, though, and here's why. Yes, you might not be able to hang on for quite as long, but if you do this first before you do the rest of your strength training, it's going to negatively impact all of your movements that do require a lot of strength, since your grip is going to be a little bit fried. So yeah, jump up on the bar, see how long you can hang. I wouldn't recommend, going to failure every set or anything. I would hold on until it feels challenging, hold for a few seconds, drop, and then repeat that for a couple sets. So let me just go through real quick some of my favorite grip strength exercises. It's going to be the farmer's walk, heavy deadlifts, depending on the person and the grip, of course, plate pinches, and bar hangs.
Awesome. That's super fun. I'm going to work backwards, actually, because I'm going to start where you ended. Jake mentioned the bar hang. What I usually refer to that as is a hang stretch. Same movement, but the reason why I refer to it as a hang stretch is because, just like Jake's talking about, I tend to use it at the end of a session with a client so that not only are they improving their grip strength, but they're actually the primary use for it in this setting is to get a full upper body stretch. Because when you do that bar hang, you're also stretching all the way from your grip all the way down to, your hips. So you can kind of ride around your upper, lower spine. And that is, in my opinion, one of the best, most effective stretches that you can do. So when I have people doing that, even though it's for the stretch, the thing that always comes out first, the thing that reaches its failure point quickest is that grip strength, right? So it's one of those kind of twofers that I like to do. But my straight up answer prior to you talking about the bar hang was going to be pull-ups. And the reason why pull-ups are my favorite are pretty much all the same reasons you just said. But there's, as I like to do a functional component added on top of that, which is hopefully none of us ever find ourselves in a position where we have to pull our bodies up onto something. But if and when, or if you do find yourself in that situation, having the skills to lift your body weight with your upper body and your grip strength is a potentially life-saving ability. If you get stuck somewhere, where you need to climb some rocks or whatever it may be, you know what I mean? The situation, it's not like it's going to happen every day, but when it happens, if it happens, you're going to be stoked that you've been practicing pull-ups, right? And even though in the context of how I'm talking about it, the grip strength is a secondary benefit, for me, there aren't many movements that work that more effectively. To give an example, and this is why I said I want to go back to the farmer's walk, and I'll even kind of include the plate pinch in this. For me, I am less of a fan of those. Let me rephrase. They have their place and their purpose for me, but I like to kind of move folks on to more, like I would favor a heavier dumbbell push over a farmer's walk myself. The reason being is because we can continue to progress your compound muscle group, which is going to be the most broadly effective, time-efficient way to spend the time that you're working with me as a client and a trainer. And in the midst of that, as we continue to challenge raise your weight and challenge your resistance, that's also simultaneously challenging your grip strength. So, granted, we're talking about very different people and needs throughout this conversation, right? Which is a really important piece of this conversation. That said, if I can make something for a client more functionally applicable, I'm going to do that. So here's where that gets a little wonky. If they have a job or they at home are in a situation where they have to walk around carrying big, heavy things, there is no better exercise for them than farmer's walk. If functionally all day long they've got to go around, like if they say they're an actual farmer, granted, you're probably not going to give a farmer a farmer's walk because they're doing it plenty enough in their job, right?
They're probably good.
Exactly. But the idea being that if you have a functional use for that, then I'm the first one to sign you up for the farmer's walk. But if you're not going to be doing that very often, that might be something that I'll do once in a while, whereas I'm actively focusing on improving your grip strength every single time that we work out via more traditional means and modalities. So that's my little two-piece on the pull-up and on grip strength, the pull-up and another one I said. The dumbbell, using the dumbbells was the other one that I said. Here's the other key to using the dumbbells when we're talking about grip strength: changing the directional load, right? So when we're talking about improving grip strength via more traditional means like bicep curls and whatever pushes and pulls, putting an emphasis on loading that grip from different directions and making it do other things increases its viability and its usefulness, because you never know in real life from what angle you're going to have to grab something, right? And then my last little bit, I think that was actually it. That was my last one. I had something else written down here, but it doesn't make sense to me. So I'm going to count that as it doesn't count.
And we'll challenge your grip too that I forgot to mention. We talked about dumbbells a lot here. If you use kettlebells instead of dumbbells, say when you're doing a farmer's walk with that wider handle, on the kettlebell, it's going to challenge your grip a little bit more. So there's a thought there. But overall, yeah, those are great exercises to challenge the grip. The only thing though with grip strength is you are always technically working your grip strength when there's something in your hand when you're doing any type of resistance training. So that's something to keep in mind. So it might not be something that someone's necessarily going to need. It's going to be dependent, of course, on the person. And if it's their grip that is giving out before the rest of their muscles are giving out during that movement, that's when you probably have to work on it a little bit.
I forgot. So my favorite one is the one that I couldn't read. Not wearing weightlifting gloves. That is, for me, the best answer to this question, because even though you can still obviously greatly improve your grip strength when you're using the weightlifting gloves, what happens is that material creates some of the traction, some of the friction that you will naturally use in your body and in your hands to create calluses, which basically act as weightlifting gloves. So when we're talking about grip strength, it's important to talk about protection to your hand, and that as we're improving grip strength, there's also a strengthening of the skin in the hand via callusing that happens very naturally when you're lifting without gloves. When you're lifting with gloves, you don't get the opportunity to build those calluses. Your functional grip strength effectively goes down in the functional world because you're not walking around with weightlifting gloves. So that's my favorite one of them all, and they're kind of outside the box. But
maybe some people are walking around with gloves. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Oh my gosh.
Someone out there probably is.
They look good.
So yeah, let's go into our Q&A for the day, and that is how not to lose muscle while dieting or in a caloric deficit. So this is really important. This is for people that are looking to lean out, lose a little bit of body fat. And there's going to be nothing life-changing here, nothing that you probably haven't heard before, but we're just going to emphasize those points again. And so, number one, it's going to be a duh moment, but resistance training. So some people make the mistake, say they like to lift weights, and they're also a fan of, doing different work, cardiovascular work or aerobic work. And the second they decide they want to lose weight, they stop resistance training. All they do is excessive amounts of cardio. Over time, this is going to create what would be called that skinny fat look. So you're going to lose body fat, yes, of course, but you're also going to lose muscle. So you're actually not going to even look more lean. You're just going to look smaller. And most people, I don't think that's the goal. Most people that want to lose weight, it's more they want to lose fat, not muscle necessarily. So resistance training is going to be number one. Number two is going to be make sure you're consuming an adequate and optimal amount of protein, or even high protein. Especially when we're in a caloric deficit, this is important for a couple reasons. One, the direct effect with sustaining or gaining muscle mass and the effects that protein has on that. So that's obvious, but the not so obvious one, when you consume a high amount of protein, especially if you're in a caloric deficit, it is the most satiating macronutrient, protein versus fats and carbohydrates, meaning it's going to make you full and keep you full for longest. So imagine eating 200 calories of, say, a meat, some lean protein source like chicken versus 200 calories from a protein bar, for example. Or it doesn't even have to be a protein bar. It can be 200 calories of anything else that doesn't have a lot of protein in it. That would probably be a better example. You're going to be way more full and satiated by consuming a higher amount of protein. And it's also, the protein is going to be muscle sparing. So make sure that you're consuming an adequate amount of protein. Do you have something?
Yeah, I want to jump in and say it's important to note that, and we're getting into semantics here, so it's going to sound like I'm disagreeing with Jake, but you guys stick with me for a second. The macronutrient that makes us feel fullest longest, which is when we're talking about being satiated, is actually fat. So when we're talking about protein is going to be the most functionally effective building block material. But when we're talking about long-term satiety, satiating your hunger, healthy fats are going to be your best bet for staying satiated longer. Here's the key to that. That doesn't do you any good. That fat that makes you feel fuller longer doesn't do you any good if you're not actually rebuilding your body with the protein that it needs. So, it's two sides of the same coin, which is why I'm not disagreeing with Jake. But it is really important that you guys note when we're talking about full balanced nutrition that fat has a very important component in making us feel fullest, longest, in terms of how long till we have the feeling of needing to consume food again.
So I'm gonna counter that again just a little bit.
Yeah.
So protein is the most satiating. Fat is the least satiating, but fat is the most sustaining. Meaning with the higher amount of calories per gram, it's going to be more of, if you want to call it, a time release effect with your hunger, but it's actually the least satiating. So if you were to eat, say, 100 calories of something high in fat versus a protein, you will be satiated more with the protein. But the fat, a better example of sustaining is it takes long to digest. So it's going to help in that effect.
Yeah.
But at the moment while you're eating it, it's not going to make you feel, it'll actually make you feel the least full if you look at all the macronutrients side by side.
So let's find a middle ground here for our listeners, because as you guys can see as you're listening, really a core of what Jake and I are discussing right now ultimately comes down to semantics. And we're talking about, satiating versus how long it lasts. The idea and the take home from mine and Jake's conversation about this is that in order to have proper, well-rounded, balanced nutrition for maintaining muscle and losing fat weight, you need both lean protein and fats, good fats.
Absolutely. And
happy middle ground.
Having balance is going to help a lot too. Like when people go so crazy with trying to cut out different macronutrients or different foods when you don't need to, that's not going to really contribute to long-term success. At least I don't think so. If you have a balance of all those, and protein is the main macronutrient that you're concerned about per meal, that is going to be the most muscle sparing. And then as Clayton mentioned his points about satiating, it's going to give you all of that. So far we have resistance training, as we all know, having optimal amount of protein. And then number 3, it's going to kind of go hand in hand with what I touched on with resistance training. And this is, don't switch to an endurance-based modality. And now this is if your goal is to be as lean as possible and just lose body fat. Because if we switch over to an endurance-based modality and we stop resistance training, we're going to lose fat and we're going to lose muscle. Because our body wants to be able to perform that event that we are doing so time and time again. So if it's an endurance-based event, our body's going to adapt to that event to be able to perform at its best over time, meaning you're going to lose muscle and you're going to lose body fat. So that does go hand in hand with number 1, but don't just do excessive amounts of cardio, unless, of course, that is something that you want to do. And I did want to bring up a really cool study that Brad Schoenfeld did regarding this topic. And Brad Schoenfeld is the leading researcher in the world with muscle hypertrophy, so it's someone I definitely trust when I go to for information like this. And he did a really cool study regarding the same topic. And what he did, he took a bunch of resistance-trained athletes, so they did have experience with resistance training, and he put them in a calorie deficit to see what was going to happen and how one could maintain muscle versus what would happen if the other group, let me rephrase that. So the point being, he put athletes in a calorie deficit. One group trained this way, the other group trained this way, and he wanted to see the differences. So the first group, they continued to do the same resistance training that they already did and did not notice a significant amount of muscle loss. They all maintained it pretty well. The second group dropped the amount of training volume they did, so they did a lot less sets and repetitions. So they still resistance train, but the volume went way down while they were in this caloric deficit or when they were AKA on a diet. By doing that, by dropping the volume, they did lose a decent amount of muscle mass in the process. So that's really good to know. Some people think, okay, now I'm dieting, or I'm in a little bit of a caloric deficit. I should significantly change my training volume. But that's not the case if you are trying to maintain your lean body mass and also be as lean as you can. So it's just something to keep in mind. But of course, you do have to gauge what feels best for you. If you're in the gym and you're feeling sick and you can't do more sets, we've probably gone a little bit too far, more with our calorie deficit than anything. But just keep that in mind. If you do drop your train volume significantly and you are in a calorie deficit for a significant amount of time, then there is a high likelihood that you are going to lose a little bit of muscle.
I'd like to throw in my little piece there, being that generally speaking, a way to simplify it is rule of thumb: have a goal in mind and have the tools that best help you reach that goal, right? While we're talking about specifically what that means, I would argue that it's more important that one is willing to question and experiment and try different things that people are talking about and try different things and finding out what works for you. Because while we're talking about, fairly linear, straightforward information, this information becomes complex as we introduce more variables. And when we talk about each individual situation, there are variables that will contribute to how you handle that specifically. That said, if you follow what we're talking about here, broad strokes, general rule of thumb, you're going to find success because the things that we're talking here are philosophically and principally sound.
That's a word.
Is it principally? That sounded right.
That's it. Sounds good to me.
It is now.
We'll call it that.
Right. While we're talking about the broad range of topics that we've talked about throughout this episode, it always comes back down to finding what works for you. And no matter what you hear me and Jake talk about here today or tomorrow or the next day, we are both on our own individual and collective journey of finding out what works for us. And that's a lifelong journey.
I really like that you said variables. That's very true. There's a lot of variables, and I think some of the biggest variables in this specific topic that we're talking about right now is if someone is brand new to resistance training versus if someone's been doing it for a couple of years. Because with those different variables, the outcome can be significantly different, especially with a new person. It's going to be a lot easier to gain muscle and lose fat, or not lose fat while they're not lose muscle while they're in a calorie deficit if it's a new person. That's a very known thing. So that's a great point with the variables. And the last point that I have here, and this one is unbelievably important, and I made a mistake for years and years and years for not taking this one seriously, and that is prioritizing sleep.
Oh
And
my God, yeah.
one of the stupidest, and I literally used to think this way, one of the stupidest cliches is that I'll sleep when I'm dead. Now, I like the idea behind that. It's normally about someone, working hard and being gritty and all that. But if you do not prioritize sleep, and for most people, it's going to be 7 to 9 hours. That, again, is very general. Some people a little less, some a little more. If you don't do that, it's going to be harder for you to gain strength. It's going to be harder for you to gain muscle. It's going to be easier to gain body fat, that's for sure. And you're setting yourself up for failure. And then obvious things like cognitively, you're not going to be there if you don't sleep. And performance is going to go down. Energy levels are going to go down. Everything is going to be negatively impacted if you do not prioritize sleep. And man, I don't know why it took me so long I don't know if it's I didn't believe it or if it was more of something I just didn't understand how important it was to that degree. And maybe it was because my career and it was some badge of honor always being tired. But man, I felt like garbage all the time. Like I felt like a zombie. I'm surprised like I was even able to train. I was so sleep deprived all the time. But prioritizing sleep is going to be huge. And just a few little takeaways or tangibles that you could start applying today to help you sleep. Especially might be a little hard to do that if you are dieting. So here are a few things. Go to bed at the same time every night if you can. That's going to help very much so to be on a schedule to do that. Also at night, if you can start dimming your lights, about an hour before bedtime, if that's possible, that's another great way to go. You want to set your body up for success to actually be able to fall asleep. So if we can put screen downs, if that's possible at night, especially if that's keeping you up, then I would recommend doing that too. If you can sleep in a very dark and cool room, that seems to help as well. Another really cool one, Clayton, I learned that I forgot to tell you about. This one is brand new to me, and I didn't know this until a few weeks ago. And I learned this from Dr. Andrew Huberman of the Huberman Lab podcast. He's a professor at Stanford. And he mentioned don't drink your coffee, if you're a coffee drinker, your coffee or caffeine in the morning until you've been awake for at least about 90 minutes or so. And he explained in depth why and the physiology behind it. I'm not going to go into that now. I don't want to butcher it since I don't have it all right in front of me, but it did make sense what he was saying. Don't drink coffee right away in the morning. Wait a little bit if it is possible. Another one too, stay away from stimulants in the afternoon or night if that keeps you up as well. And even if you don't feel the coffee or the caffeine anymore, it still stays in your system for a little bit, so that can really impact your sleep as well. Did you have any other sleeping type of little tips that we can give the audience?
Yeah. There's you mentioned a lot of them. Really important. Sleep hygiene is really important. Using your bed only for sleep and sex is really important. Using methods such as PMR, progressive muscle relaxation, are really important tools. PMR is basically going through your body and you're flexing a part of your body for a certain amount of time, then relaxing, and you're going through your body progressively to do that. That's been really useful for me. And you've touched on a really important subject that's really important to me in particular, because I'm a lifelong insomniac. When I was around 12 years old, I just stopped sleeping. And we can get in later future episodes, we'll talk about all the intricacies of that. But the result was that because I didn't sleep enough or well enough for many years, I ended up getting myself into a severe, it's not sleep deprivation, it's where it collects over time. I'm forgetting the language that we use to describe
Chronic something?
No, it's basically a buildup. You have a bill that becomes due with sleep. Say if I need 8 hours every night. If I get 5 hours every night, I'll be okay for those first 3 days. But once I get 5 hours a night for 2 weeks, all of that lack of sleep adds up. And that's how our bodies work. We all, as human beings, that's how sleep works. So consistent sleep, like you said, doing what you can to make a habit of that. And I will say, one of the most important tools that I've ever learned as far as helping sleep, which again, the importance of helping sleep is that's when we rebuild our muscles, right? So there's no point in lifting, no point in working out if we're not going to sleep. Granted, we're all going to sleep at some point, so it's kind of a moot point, but it's when we're sleeping, it's when we're recovering that our muscles build back stronger than they were, which is arguably the entire point of the resistance work to begin with. So we've established sleep absolutely necessary. How can we do these little things to sleep a little bit better? We've talked about some of those things, but here's the best one, and here's the tool that I use the most. And it's not as straight up as an answer as you might think, but it's exercise. Now, here's where I'm saying it gets a little wonky, because exercise absolutely contributes for me to better sleep. But just like coffee, if I exercise at the wrong time for myself, it can actually have the opposite effect and energize me and spur on my insomnia. So it comes back down to the point of what I was saying before, which is find out how it works for you. But just like not drinking coffee later in the day, a lot of people find they can't work out at night. I will work out at night once in a while now, but it's only if I'm going to be up really late. If I on my regular schedule, I will not work out past 4 p.m., 3 or 4 p.m. if I can avoid it, just because for me it doesn't really work that well. So,
dude, you know what? That just gave me an idea. We should do an episode in the near future with sleep hygiene, and sleeping for performance. Let's do that soon.
Totally.
You down?
I would be stoked. We could probably do like a week-long theme, honestly. Not to say I think we necessarily should, but this is a really important topic, and it's a nuanced, research-driven topic. Like we didn't even touch on circadian rhythms. For those of you who aren't familiar, circadian rhythms are our body's natural processes through neurotransmitters and our other various brain processes that dictate our moods, our sleep, our general ebb and flow of our day-to-day, really. So whenever we're talking about circadian rhythms, it becomes a whole other conversation that we could do a podcast.
Yeah, dude, let's do that. We should do that for a Friday debrief. Let's do, cool. You got me all, I started feeling like I wanted to geek out on what you were saying right now. Yeah. And there's so much I still want to learn too about sleep. So let's do that for the audience. Let's do a Friday debrief with that. That's a great idea.
Love it. All right, you heard it, audience. We said it here. That means it has to happen. We have committed.
That's right. Well, all right, everyone. We thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. If you did find value in our content, please subscribe to the show if you haven't. And then if you could scroll down there on your phone and leave us a review, it's going to help grow the show tremendously. You can find us on Instagram at Mission Driven Made. And also, we have a new and free online fitness community, and it's called The Forum. So if you go on to Facebook and you typed in Mission Driven Made, The Forum, or if you click that link that you're going to see there in the show notes, you could click that and then sign up. It's completely free. It's a place where you can go and converse with other listeners of the podcast. And it's also somewhere you can go to ask Clayton and I questions. This can be anything fitness, health, nutrition, mindset, or lifestyle related. We are on there checking every day, and we would be happy to answer any of your questions there. It's also somewhere where I'm going to start posting more studies, just really cool, fascinating topics that we feel will be lots of value for you guys. All right, everyone, thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, everyone, stay mission driven.